Welcome to the film analysis, today with Paw Patrol, the mighty movie by Cal Branca. We already talked about the neoliberal ideology of Paw Patrol in a video. In the new film, the dogs become superheroes. Who would have thought it? Hollywood knows nothing else to talk about than superhero movies, hence why the Paw Patrol troupe must become a superhero troupe too. But before we go into more detail, we must take a step back and consider what is special about talking about films created for children. Or rather, is there such a thing as children's films? Neil Postman would say, not really. We have something like children's books because when you read, you first must develop your competency bit by bit in order to understand more complicated texts later. With images, says Neil Postman, it's completely different. He refers especially to television, and he directs this criticism at the disappearance of childhood, especially in regards to television. But we can also extend this to cinema. And Postman says quite impressively at one point that we are no longer dealing with an information hierarchy in television. He says television, however, removes the basis of this information hierarchy. That is, all images can be seen by children as well as adults. Unlike a complicated text, one isn't subjected to a closed work one grasps at a later age with more knowledge. Postman writes, crucially, television presents information in a form that is indiscriminately accessible to everyone. And that means television doesn't need to distinguish between the categories of child and adult. Now, there are children's shows. Paw Patrol is aimed specifically at children, not at parents. It's not like the animated films from Pixar catering for young and old. The dogs and their companions are cutely drawn. We have voices for children's ears, punchlines for children's minds. All the overwroughtness is the sum of dominating and enervating children's television. The cuteness the culture industry produces coincides with the sugar industry produces. But how do we deal with Postman's thesis? It is nevertheless true. Paw Patrol, the mighty movie, represents an adult film for children. The film does not open a child's world, but it prepares the little ones for the world of the big ones. The film serves the narratives of the outside world, establishes its arcs of tension. The children can follow it due to the images and simple dialogues. We are dealing with a continuation of the wretched blockbuster production of the present, but it is also ideological preparation for the reality. What is it about? Evil threatens Adventure City, this time in the form of a sinister scientist. She wants to use a meteorite to reduce the city to rubble, which the dogs naturally want to prevent. But first, the dogs have already been given superheroes by another meteorite. Each dog now has its own superpower and can thus not only stand in the way of the scientist Victoria Vance, but also the evil ex-mayor Humdinger. Victoria Vance, called V, now wants to use a magnet to lure out another meteorite and then destroy everything. To thwart this, there is a mini-Paw Patrol of puppies in addition to the already established Paw Patrol. We witness animals and war perfectly aligning on social media, where more and more emphasis is being placed on reporting touching stories from wars in which animals play an important role. It's also cute, and these puppies, as we see during the film, are subjected to military service at a military station in the open sea. Becoming well trained, child soldiers, but acting not on behalf of the state, but for this private mercenary force called Paw Patrol. The second part does not leave the neoliberal paradigm of the series, but even expands it. In the series, the dogs exercise their private enterprise above all, taking over state tasks domestically, private fire brigade, police, public order office. Now privatization has advanced. The monopoly on the use of force at the international level is also becoming a market. The dogs now intervene heavily armed on the field of war. In doing so, they are following in the footsteps of the Marvel superheroes, the Torettos, the Expendables. All of these are dynamic, efficient intervention forces that can restore world peace if need to be. Once again, it becomes apparent that Paw Patrol is more than primitively drawn and horribly annoying. Much worse, children are robbed of their childhood by being confronted with what is readily called hardship in life and required to toughen up. They are expected to be ready at an early age to intervene militarily whenever necessary. First impressions are deceptive. At no point are we dealing with a children's film. The latter would open the realm of fantasy if it told something that children's eyes can still see, but which is all too often close to adults. A world like that of Pooh the bear, for example, beyond the logic of domination, beyond the reason of state and militarism, Paw Patrol the Mighty Movie takes the opposite approach. It sells the military as cute and colorful. Ideologically, the film hammers home early that you are always siding with the good guys. In the end, it's also stating we protect Adventure City and the good guys, and no stakes, as is emphasized again and again, are too great, even for the smallest paw. It can also always show what it's made of, recruitment at all levels. Equipped with superpowers, everyone is allowed to rise above, which in superhero logic means they are allowed to behave heroically. They call out to each other, as we know from the Marvel universe. We believe in you. I will not let you down. And Liberty also finally gets a superpower. For a long time she waits for it. She obtains a stretchy body and comments on it by saying, "I always wanted to be more flexible," the credo of neoliberalism par excellence. The little viewers are trained to be Pavlovian dogs here. They are supposed to learn what the so-called adult world expects of them. Global armament meets a globally successful franchise. The bluntness and crudeness of reality is poured into a blunt and crude story. One could have chosen not to make a superhero film. One could have told something different, but no. There are only world-threatening scenarios, and apparently heroes are needed to protect us from the threat. Heroes who are ready for anything. Cinema is also recruiting its viewers of the future here. It is directing them towards what adult audiences have been expecting all along, namely one superhero film after another. And of course, when we talk about dogs, it's natural to talk about conditioning. Pavlov undertook a famous experiment. If you show the dog food, it's an immediate stimulus, saliva production starts. If you just ring a bell, nothing happens at first. But If you bring this into a close temporal relationship, if you first ring a bell and always give food immediately afterwards, then at some point the dog will get the point where when you ring the bell, saliva production starts immediately. How does conditioning proceed? Certain figures or narratives, such as aesthetic set pieces, have become ingrained as good and right. They are hammered into us, and we become conditioned to them. The smallest dog, we learn early on here in this film, is always the greatest hero, and we can apply the message to all the other films to come, so we always already know, yes, that's how it goes. That's how it must be. Villains look like villains, and when the world is threatened, the film creators immediately ring the bell with us and we say, the world must be saved. We no longer ask any questions, we run to the feeding bowl. Doesn't that also apply to political slogans? Yes, says Herbert Marcuse in his book One-Dimensional Man. And in a way, the ideal title for Paw Patrol, as the film educates one-dimensional people. And Marcuse writes, in this behaviorist universe, words and concepts tend to coincide, or rather the concept tends to be absorbed by the word. The latter has no other content than public and standardized use, and the word is not supposed to do anything beyond public and standardized behavior. The word becomes a cliché, and as a cliché dominates the spoken or written language. Communication thus preempts a real development of meaning. End of quote. Now, that's very abstractly formulated, but what does Marcuse refer to? Well, there are a lot of high-quality words in discourse always used, and everyone immediately nods and says, yes, yes, that's how it is. A bell is rung, and everyone knows immediately, carrying a certain understanding of the respective words. Marcuse continues to write, at the nodal points of the universe of public speech, sentences appear that are self-affirming, analytical, and function like magical ritual forms. By being hammered into the mind of the receiver again and again, they produce the effect of enclosing him in the perimeter of conditions decreed by the formula. End of quote. This very enclosure is interesting. Marcuse says nouns such as freedom, equality, democracy, and peace analytically imply a certain set of attributes occurring whenever the noun is pronounced or spelled. Thus meaning, as Marcuse writes, these ritualized concepts are immunized against contradiction. This leads to simply calling up these terms like ringing the bell in Pavlov. Marcuse goes on, thus the fact that the dominant mode of freedom is servitude and the dominant mode of equality is externally imposed inequality is prevented from finding expression by the closed definition of these terms in terms of the powers that model the particular universe of speech. These observations finally lead into Orwellian language in the extreme when war is rendered peace and peace is war. Going back to Paw Patrol, what baseline scenario does it feature? What is the threat consisting of? The dogs and the puppies are fighting together with heavy military equipment. We are locked into a threat scenario where all we have to say is, yes, you must fight for freedom and you protect the good guys. That's what you said. After all, the framework itself is no longer questioned. Pooh the bear would ask, why do we have to fight at all? Why do we have to dominate others at all? Why can't we rather play or sleep? childlike questions that would benefit adults as well. But the film doesn't pose these questions. The dogs don't ask them. But the Paw Patrol creators, with their canine ideology, don't ask them either. It is enough to shout freedom and immediately everyone is ready to defend it, instead of questioning whether what is being defended really means freedom. Paw Patrol forbids children to ask their favorite question. What do children like to ask most? Why? And they do like to ask it most, and rightly so. But this film just says, that's why. That's why you must fight. That's why films must be like this. And that's why you are trapped in blockbuster logic. Paw Patrol wants kids to watch, but not to see.
It would be nice if you would like to support the film analysis financially. You can do so via my bank account or PayPal. Also, you can find me on Patreon. Thank you very much.